Hey, you, your blog sucks, so let's talk. Okay, I'm not going to talk about all the basics that every article online is going to tell you about how to make your blogs better. Those are going to be things like make sure you write engaging content, make sure you connect with your reader, find relevant topics that are doing well online. If you're trying to do better with your blogs, it's most likely that you've already looked up those things if they weren't already common sense. Yes, believe it or not, you have to write good content that people will enjoy for your blogs to be valuable by Google. Those topics are important and they should be being done, but those are the basics. And if you want to actually put your blog about other people's, there are extra steps that you guys should be using to actually do that. But how do I get my blog #1 to Google in only 5 easy steps? That's not possible. There are variables you need to consider and you need to appeal to Google in a variety of different ways to have hope in ranking your site. The bottom line is there's a lot of things you have to do and you have to do well to be able to get there, and sometimes it's just not fair what makes one blog do well over another. What I'm going to be focusing on is 3 basic points after you've covered good content, engage with your readers, look for relevant topics, and that's going to be things that I think are more tangible and more helpful. Number 1, how often should you be posting, the frequency? Number 2, how do you even find these trending keywords that you want to try and use in putting out a blog? And number 3, I think one of the most important aspects that people often overlook is the SEO in the blog. Or in other words, what are you putting into the blog and categorizing to make sure that when you have this great piece of content, it's actually doing the things you want it to do for you. Step number 1, frequency. How often should you be writing a blog? Now, this should be asked, how frequently can you be putting out a blog? Because when it comes down to it, there's a best case scenario, and then there's the scenario that most people fall into, which is making the most out of what you have. So you don't have a full team of blog writers being able to put out content every single day to try and help you rank? That's right, most people don't. A big thing to say here is don't start off on, let's say, the expert recommended 2 to 4 blogs per week. Bottom line is you may be able to do that for 1 week, but you'll very quickly start ghosting your platform and all of a sudden you'll have no blogs going out. Overall, Google wants to see consistency. It wants to see that you're continually contributing to the platform and adjusting your site and putting out content. So if you have an amazing flash of great content over a week and then you stop for 6 months, that's not going to help you. What we typically tell people is start with an amount that you know for a fact you can do, and then start scaling it up as your process gets more efficient. A lot of our clients will start off on 1 blog a month. Try and provide content, format, do it correctly, 1 blog a month at the same time on the same day. Now, if you're able to do that, increase the intake and watch the data. Everything that you're deciding on from a blog perspective should be backed in data, because every decision you're making, you can measure if it's working or if it's not working. So end result on frequency, start with 1 blog a month if that's what you can do. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3. At the bottom line though, you're gonna start there and you're gonna work up your frequency until number 1, the data starts doing worse or better, but track it. Or option 2, you get to a point where you physically cannot put out more blogs with your available timescale. And then you can consider outsourcing or just getting okay with the fact that you can't put out the best amount of blogs that you can. Option 2, let's talk about how to identify keyword topics using tools and resources that you have. So, people always say, well, make sure you're using trending or relevant topics in your blogs, which, of course, duh, you want to write on things that are interesting. But how do you tell what people actually think are interesting versus what just you think is interesting? Because at the end of the day, the ability to get a blog or a website to rank high doesn't really care about what you think is interesting. It has to do with what people and the user base is searching. There's tons of tools out there that help you identify what keywords are getting searched. Here are just a few. What do we like to use? Our favorite is SEMrush, now, or SEMrush. I don't know exactly how everybody pronounces it, but I think it's SEMrush. Now, I'm gonna show up essentially what it looks like to go through an SEMrush dashboard quickly and be able to look at some tools that you can find. Now, if you see here, you can see that essentially I can get to keywords, I can go look at them, I can see what's being searched at what volume, how difficult it is, I can click through to the link, I can find out the resource that it's providing. Is it actually providing resources? Essentially, what's the most popular questions people are asking online, and are there good or sufficient answers to those questions? Oftentimes, you'll find a phrase that is related to your industry, of a potential question people are asking, that also, when you go look at it, doesn't have very many good answers. That's a great opportunity to create an answer or resource to fit a need that you know is there because the data suggests it. Now, if you already know the niche or topic that you're trying to speak on, you can still use this data. Instead of maybe using one phrase, use another that has better traffic volume. Instead of titling your blog something that you think is quirky or sounds good, incorporate keywords that you know are going to get found online into those same positions. Now keep in mind, where you put these keywords in the positioning on your page and what they're titled as impacts how well your blog is going to do and the relevancy of where you put that phrase, which is an excellent transition into our option number 3, which we get into is how do you optimize your blog? We see time and time again, there are people that put out good content, they write it, it's original, and then they go post it at the wrong time, the wrong frequency, not using the correct keywords, and then ultimately not even providing the set of instructions to Google to even know that it's a blog. Keep in mind, everything that you put out on your website or anything that is online has a set of instructions or tags or descriptions that you can provide Google so that Google knows how to interpret what you're providing it. If you have a website that has a title and that title has the wrong tag, Google's not going to give that title the priority that you might. So instead of actually focusing on the overall objective or keyword that you want it to, it could be focusing on something entirely different based on what you tag it. This is what we're going to get into essentially. Once you have a blog and you upload it, how are you going to tag that effectively to where Google actually knows what to do with it? Now in my example, I'm going to use WordPress because that's the ultimate platform that we use for most of our blogging and what most of our clients' blogs go out on. Now, this platform is going to be essentially utilizing a few different tools that we have downloaded, but overall, it's still giving you the same instructions on how to label your blogs. So let's look at some of the areas in the blog that can actually help Google understand what you're writing about. Number 1, your title and your title tags. Now, as I mentioned before, simply having a title isn't going to help Google identify what your search is about. The title has to have the proper tagging. There's H1s, H2s, H3s, body text. Essentially, there's a little description that you can attach to any type of keyword, phrase, block on your website, which is a little roadmap where you're telling Google, what does this thing mean? What's the relevancy of it? If you have a title, you want that to be H1 text, or you want that to be essentially the number 1 priority for Google to look at on that page. Don't duplicate your H1s because Google doesn't like that. Also, don't have no H1s because Google doesn't like that either. Google wants to see that you have an understanding of what that page is and have an explanation for why you're choosing that title over another. That applies to tagging of all kinds. You want every type of text you have to have the proper tag so that it's explaining to Google correctly what that particular caption is about. Number 2, have your metadata set up. These are things like what your slug is called, what not only your title, the page is, but the title and the link, your slug, your URL, your meta description, a few things that we like to use Yoast for to essentially outline on any given page. Number 4, back to your actual on-page changes here. You can just throw out a chunk of text on your website and hope people read it, but lay it out in a way that Google's going to be able to see and understand and give priority to over someone else. What are things like this? Let's start off with linking. On any blog you have, it's going to be helpful for it to have internal and external links. During your blog, you can reference things that you explain in other blogs or even other aspects of your website, link from it to that other aspect. For example, if you're writing a blog on the benefits of 1 or 2 products, maybe have a link to that product when you mention it back to your website. This is showing Google that you have interconnected links that essentially bring people to other resources as they want to without having to go look around the site and try and find them. This is why a lot of times when you're reading blogs, they mention things like, if you'd like to know more on this, feel free to go check out my other blog on this. Or they'll just simply be hyperlinks in the blog explaining where other places are that you can link to. You also want to have external links. This is where you can have links going to other places, resources, or even other companies themselves. This is where you can have a link potentially going to a definition. You can have a link going to another good reference for what you're explaining. Ultimately, you can even reference links to people that sell something or offer something that's entirely different, but is still remotely in the same field. What I mean by this is, now if you're a medical center, maybe you don't have links to the local ice cream stand, but you could have links to potentially a nutritional website or potentially blog writers that explain their takes on certain medications. Overall, it's still relating back to your industry, and it proves to Google that you hang out with good friends online. Space up with your blogs, have headers, have bullets, have pictures, link your pictures. Essentially have headers, have subheaders, and essentially break down your content in a way that is, yes, easy for a person to understand, but also easy for Google to understand. Finally, something that we do on all of our clients' blogs is provide content in FAQ format or similar like content. Essentially, make sure you provide content in a way that's more likely to be pulled from Google for different avenues. For example, voice search, if you yell at Siri or Alexa to help get you some information, or if you ask a question online to Google directly. Every snippet you see that has a little drop down and additional questions and answers are going to be pulled from other formats on websites that support that. If you have a blog that has an FAQ format that when you click down it has the answer and it's an easy answerable snippet that's relating to a popular question, Google's more likely to pull content from something like that versus just a massive paragraph of text to be used. Therefore, if you create some FAQ style formats in your blog, you're giving yourself more opportunities for Google to pull that and use that as answers to people with specific questions. So after you figured out that you need to have quality content, you should be engaging with your users, and ultimately you should be trying to find relevant topics, make sure you pay attention to these next 3 tips that we went through. Number 1, frequency of posting. Determine what the best amount that you can actually commit to is, and make sure that you put out the content and measure to see if it deems worthy to add more or less. Number 2, identify your keywords, titles, and topics based on actual data that supports what's trending and what's being searched. Number 3, optimize your blog once you have the content on page just with a few basic steps that we went over. Proper tagging, proper titles, images, links, proper structure, FAQ style format. Now overall, there are tons of things you can do to put out a good blog, but these are our favorite 3 that we have seen be the most beneficial to clients that oftentimes are overlooked. Best of luck writing those blogs and let us know how they do for you.